Welcome. Today we're going to look at the largest single monster bestiary I've ever seen, and it's for Shadowdark. The quote that kept going through my brain as I was looking at this book was, "Quantity has a quality all of its own." And that definitely holds true for this book. It's the Shadowfinder Bestiary for Shadowdark. It's big. It's over 500 pages, 520, I think to be exact. 1,700 monsters culled from D&D's History and Paizo Game Studio. I was happy to see H.P. Lovecraft themes throughout the book. So there's Lovecraftian monsters and Clark Ashton Smith monsters, things from the Cthulhu Mythos, and then a large number of dangerous end bosses. It includes 6 Pathfinder bestiaries worth of monsters, all converted to Shadowdark. But first, right after the break, we'll answer the question, what is the connection between Dungeons & Dragons history and Pathfinder, and why this bestiary matters if you're a Shadowdark player? Welcome to my channel. I'm John. I'm an old-time referee. This is a place where I like to talk about old-time Dungeons & Dragons and Shadowdark, which is a modern game, but it plays like an old-school Dungeons & Dragons game. And from time to time, I'll look at Shadowdark books that I find really interesting, like this one today. In fact, I actually cyberstalked the author a little bit because I wanted to write a review on it. I wanted to ask him some questions. William from Menagerie Press was kind enough to send me a review copy and then answer my questions. The thought that kept going through my head is, why would someone convert almost 2,000 monsters? It's boggling, like the project, to set off on that. Obviously, it's a commercial project, but the size of it, again, is astounding. All right, let's dive in. We're going to start with a little bit of history and where did the connection between Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder start? So with my audience, I assume that people fall into like one of two camps. Either you're an old timer like me who's watched the different editions of Dungeons & Dragons through the years, from like the TSR years to WotC, and you've seen editions come and go. And here we are in the modern day, and you still love old school Dungeons & Dragons. Or maybe you joined the hobby since 2014. 5th edition actually was a wildly successful edition. It brought in so many new players. And at some point in their 5th edition life cycle, they say, hey, I want to see what old school D&D is all about. Maybe you come and explore the OSR a little bit. And Shadowdark's kind of a natural place to land if you're a 5e player wanting to check out the OSR. So in that case, you may not understand like kind of these early days and the connection between Paizo and Wizards of the Coast. In D&D 3.5, actually starting with 3rd edition, Wizards created something called the Open Game License. They wanted third-party publishers to write campaigns and hardbacks and adventure paths and create monsters and create adventures for D&D. They didn't want to do it all. They felt like they could stay focused on core rules and things that were like really core to the game and have third parties do like basically everything else. And 2 of the third-party publishers that really stepped up were Goodman Games and Paizo. Goodman created their Dungeon Crawl Classics line. Everybody nowadays knows Dungeon Crawl Classics, but before it was a game, it was a series of old school feeling modules for Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition. And Paizo took over Dungeon Magazine for Wizards of the Coast. They pioneered the concept of the adventure path. Some of the best early adventure paths actually were in Dungeon Magazine, like Savage Tides and Age of Worms. Their popular Rise of the Rune Lords adventure path actually started as a series of adventures for D&D 3.5. Now, somewhere along the line, the folks at Wizards of the Coast, remember there's a disconnect between shareholders and corporate executives and kind of like the industry and the fans. Somewhere along the line, the suits or the corporate types said, we want all the money. Let's create a new edition. Let's make it non-OGL. Let's break up all those old relationships and let's profit. Now, I'm a big fan of English football, the Premier League. I've got a team I follow. in soccer, there's this concept of an own goal where instead of scoring against the other team, one of your players kicks the goal in your own net. That's 4th edition. 4th edition was like a giant own goal for Wizards of the Coast, because not only did the edition end up not being commercially successful and taking the industry by storm, within about 2 or 3 years, they knew it was a train wreck commercially and they needed to start working on 5th edition. But they broke hearts and shattered relationships. And those groups that they had turned into D&D experts on their behalf, Goodman Games and Paizo, took all that in-house expertise and immediately cranked out 2 very popular and successful games, Dungeon Crawl Classics and Pathfinder, which is basically D&D 3.75. In fact, it felt like the entire audience that Wizards wanted to go from D&D 3.5 to 4th edition instead said, we're getting off here. Pathfinder is basically D&D 3.75, so we're going to take the exit and just keep on playing. So Pathfinder and Paizo as a studio, they had access to all of the monsters in D&D's history through the SRD. They were very, very good at working with them. The only things that Wizards of the Coast kept out of the SRD and out of the open game license were things like Mind Flayers, Aboleths, Beholders, Slod, like a few oddball named monsters, carrion crawlers for some reason. This is why, like in OSR games, you'll see cave creepers or carcass scavengers instead of carrion crawlers. This is like one of the weird monsters that they chose to keep out of the open game license. So those 6 Pathfinder bestiaries that exist for 1st edition Pathfinder are really just 6 Dungeons and Dragons bestiaries, more or less, plus folklore horror and some H.P. Lovecraft elements. And that's what ended up getting converted here for Shadowdark. That's why this bestiary matters to Shadowdark and why I was really excited to take a look at it. Let's take a look at the book itself and work our way through the bestiary a little bit. First thing we're going to see here is the table of contents. I'm going to just scroll through this a little bit until your eyes bleed. There's 20 pages of table of content here. It's all the monsters in the book alphabetized, and it just keeps going on and on. The one thing that's really good about this, these are all hyperlinked. So once you index to the monster you want, you click on it, it's going to take you right there. Here, let's take a look. All right, there we go. Juju Zombie. It's incredibly useful to navigate this gigantic bestiary. The other thing, because it's machine readable, it's PDF, it's searchable. Like I was looking for a monster for a scenario. I wanted monsters with tentacles. And I just like, let me find every monster in the book that has a tentacle. So I could do a search and then just like tab through and look at every monster out there. All right, let's go back to the beginning. One thing I wanted to do just to show that this really does capture these classic monsters from like 1970s, 1980s D&D. I'm going to grab a couple adventure modules. First one here, Isle of Dread. I'm actually working with this right now because one of my home campaigns is going to encounter it. All right, a monster in the Isle of Dread is the Arania. It's a kind of spider, like a sorcerer, a magical spider. Here we go, Arania, perfect. Level 2, seems fine. Poison, shapeshift. Next page, they've got a few magic abilities. Perfect. Let's go back to the index. The next one we're going to look at, let's find a monster in Castle Amber. This is an oldie but goodie. All right. One of my favorite monsters, the Brain Collector. It's not under Brain. All right. They have another name. Here we go. Nethalgu. Perfect. Oh, there we go. So the Brain Collector, it's like a crab-like spider monster with a weird mouth. And when it kills someone, it uses these surgical instruments to cut off the top of their head and then slurps their brain, and it goes into these mounds on the creature's back. So the Brain Collector wants to kill people and devour their brains. That's pretty horrifying. And then it gets more abilities based on how many brains it carries around. Looks like this conversion says strange knowledge can access memories and skills of stored brains. I think the old school version actually gave it spells based on the number of brains it had. That might be something I take a look at here, but Brain Collector, I'm glad to see you, old friend. Let's pop back to the table of contents. Take a look at another one. All right. Any old school player is going to recognize this, the cover of Palace of the Silver Princess. That creature gave us nightmares when we were like little. It is the Decapus. It's the name of the monster. All right. I got it. Decapus. Here we go. It's down here in the bottom right corner. Emerald green, octopus. Perfect. Thanian. Level 4 seems about right. 18 hit points. Yeah, I think the difference here I'm seeing between the stat blocks, like the old school Decapus, because it has 10 tentacles and it needs a couple to hang on to stuff, but then can attack with everything else. 2 attacks is right on for what a 4th level Shadowdark monster would have in the conversion guidelines, but I would probably, in my own game, bump that up to like 8 or 9 attacks and turn it into more of a boss. Otherwise, this is right on for what the Decapus looks like. Like I said, this collects all these classic monsters from D&D's history, plus a bunch of horror monsters from Paizo's tenure. There's a thing about the Paizo authors. One of the books they did during the D&D 3.5 period was called Elder Evils. It's like a collection of all the most powerful, like, end boss type monsters. Like Cthulhu probably appeared in Elder Evils. I haven't owned it in a long time, but I just remember that all the authors that were on it were actually Paizo people, probably writing as subcontractors for Wizards of the Coast. So it always felt like Paizo stayed close to horror and folklore, horror and Call of Cthulhu type stuff. Not a huge, but I've got a few Call of Cthulhu books left. It's one I rotate to every couple years as a change of pace type game. So seeing all these H.P. Lovecraft monsters in this bestiary, it was like revisiting old friends. Things like the Shoggoth, the Deep Ones, Elder Things, Shantax, Hounds of Tynalos, the Worm That Walks. Let's go find one in the table of contents. All right, great old ones. Perfect. Some of these guys are Lovecraft, maybe August Derleth or Clark Ashton Smith, but the big man himself, Cthulhu, he is a level 18 boss, 87 hit points, pure evil. Can't really kill it, just send it to the Dreamlands for a while. Madness, where it drives everyone crazy within far. So as far as Cthulhu can see, he creates madness as he walks around. He's got an aura that can just slay people. Oh, and I love the non-Euclidean bit. Relia, the sunken continent where Cthulhu lives, is full of all these weird angles of non-Euclidean geometry where you can fall through an angle and disappear from the world. So we've captured that in the stat block a little bit. Oh, the next thing I wanted to talk about was the number of end bosses and high-level opponents that are in this bestiary. So there's like demon lords and archdevils. Let's take a look at an archdevil. Balzabul. All right, Balzabul, level 22. Impervious, we'd expect. Lord of the Flies, when attacked by a hostile spell. Oh my gosh. When he's attacked, he can just force someone to kneel instead of attacking. Control swarms and usurp other people's friendly spell. Yeah. So definitely all these archdevils are really high-level opponents that could be like the end boss to a campaign. The other one I wanted to take a look at, let's get back to the table of contents, are the kaiju. So yes, Paizo created their own version of Godzilla. Logaru, a 140-foot tall bipedal dinosaur, sleeps in a lake, level 25, 118 hit points. absorbs energy and then spits out a destruction ray, basically a disintegration ray, that does 86 damage and then disintegrates anything that goes to 0 hit points. So if you want to fight your favorite gigantic Japanese monster, we've got all sorts of kaiju here. Now, I asked Will what the algorithm was, like what was his method for converting these? You're taking monsters that were built on a character level 1 through 20 scale and compressing them down to levels 1 through 10 for Shadowdark. So we talked through the algorithm, how he came up with the ability scores and the hit points. I think the art versus science part of converting monsters, and I'll say this myself because I've converted some TSR adventures as well as some 5th edition monsters, is taking a stat block that's like 1 or 2 different pages and trying to take out what you think are the most essential abilities of the monster. And this is always going to be a judgment choice, and then reducing it to like the 2 or 3 most critical things you think for Shadowdark. When I first picked up Shadowdark, I thought that the monsters were too minimalist, if I'm being honest. But then after playing a couple campaigns now over the course of the past year, I've really come to appreciate the simplicity of the monsters. Lets me think about other stuff during combat. There's a lot for the referee to keep track of, worrying about tactics and other things that are going on, morale checks. And I actually really appreciate the stripped down simplistic monsters. My only note on the conversions, I don't always agree with maybe the abilities he picked. I mentioned, I love the brain collector, but the old school version had a little bit of magic right in the stat block. This one leaves it up to the referee. Also, a few of the high level monsters, if the monster used a weapon, it got the right number of attacks. Like high level monsters might be able to attack 3, 4, 5 times in a round, but the damage used the weapon damage. And I think I might bump that up for myself. So nitpicky though, very simple for the referee to just adjust for themselves. Found this to be an incredibly useful resource. Whether you love to tinker or create things whole cloth, I found this to be an incredibly useful resource. I view this bestiary as just a gigantic accelerator or strong starting point to your homebrew. So if you're running older adventures, or maybe you're converting something from 5th edition, start by taking a look at what's in the bestiary. It'll be much faster to use an existing stat block that you can just adjust or tweak, or maybe use it 100% as is, as opposed to trying to convert the monster whole cloth yourself. The other thing I discovered, like I said, it's very searchable. So whether you're looking through the table of contents or putting a term for a kind of attack or power or name, you can just search for it and search through the entire document. And like I mentioned, I love the boss monsters or kind of the arch enemies, because if you're planning out a more long-term campaign, you can think, okay, what are the great threats in the campaign, literally right from the beginning. I also really appreciate the H.P. Lovecraft elements and kind of like the monsters that have been pulled from the Cthulhu Mythos, or those family of stories, even if they're not H.P. Lovecraft, but they're related authors like Frank Belknap Long or August Derleth or Clark Ashton Smith. There are 2 watchouts with this one I want to address. The first one should be obvious. There's no art. It's 520 pages, 1,700 monsters, 6 entire monster manuals worth of monsters crammed into a single bestiary. I think there's no way the author could have provided art for that. First off, the project would never get done, and the book would have been like 1,000 pages. It's probably already unwieldy if you try to print it. And I think I saw in a video, he does have a print on demand coming, and it's like a dictionary. All these monsters, though, they've either existed for 40 years or they were created by Paizo and they exist online. They're in the SRD. I did a cursory web search and I found pictures for all these guys. The big kaiju Mogaru, the a modern view of what the Brain Collector looks like, a picture of the Decapus. It's very, very easy to find pictures online. So I'm not worried about the art. I can always hit the wise Google and grab a picture in about 3 seconds. The other thing is this is on the pricier side for a PDF. So it's $30 over at Drive-Thru RPG. However, the typical adventure you buy that's, I don't know, 100 pages, $15, that's going to be somewhere between 10 and 20 cents a page or 15 cents a page. And at over 500 pages, this one is 6 cents per page. So really good value. I think that works out to be under 2 cents per monster when you look at the volume. Like I said, quantity has a quality all of its own. So this is a really good value for what you get. Now, in my conversations with Will, I said, is there anything else you'd want my viewers to hear about the book or anything else you'd like me to tell them? He did ask me to mention he's just wrapping up a Kickstarter. It's more Pathfinder stuff. It's a conversion of all the Pathfinder classes and spells and weapons and stuff like that. Me personally, I was mildly interested. Then when I went and looked at the Kickstarter, he's actually offering a Smithsonian A5 hardback with one of those page ribbons. I'm personally a huge sucker for high quality hardback books. So if I'm remotely interested in something, but it's got a great form factor, I'll probably do it. So I'll put a link to the Kickstarter down below, as well as a link to this bestiary in case you're interested in it. If you're like me, like you're going to homebrew a lot, you need a lot of monsters, I think this is a great reference for Shadowdark referees. That's it for today. Thanks for being here. If you made it this far, thank you. You're awesome. Please consider subscribing to my channel. Next week, it's back to other types of content. A viewer had asked, how do I prepare dungeons for convention games? How do I build my dungeons? So that's what we're going to do next week. I'm going to take you guys behind the scenes on the creation of a dungeon, how I took it from an idea and concept all the way to being ready to run at a convention. So I'm looking forward to that one. See you guys next week.